platinum light perforated the nucleus of her existence, its illumination renting the darkness all the way from her subatomic worlds to the subterranean ones, brandishing itself upon the veils that made up creation, imprinting glory in its wake. Its platinum brilliance carved open a pathway deep inside of her womb. She reeled in bittersweet agony, howled in anguish, as she was pushed and pulled like a rag doll in the hands of squabbling children. Undulating, circling, roars of time and space torched her ears, rebounding in thunder through the cavity of her chest. She was being torn apart by the power of it. Beads of sweat ricocheted in every direction. Her convulsing head looked around for the source of this experience, and suddenly she sensed the agonizing suffering and cries of her children. They were lost. They were coming undone, and something terribly, terribly horrific was happening to them. They were falling into a darkness so dense that it threatened to extinguish their connection to her love. Their cries echoed around her, and like a compass needle, she felt an irresistible force working magically, magnetically, inexorably to suck her towards them without compunction, hesitation, or delay. Her instincts, rich and inevitable, born on a plethora of feelings, cried out, "You have to do this. You must answer these prayers. Fall into your womb and attend to your children. Let go, loosen your grip, and allow your light to descend. Your children need you now." Her body began to bloat and stretch, elongating, raising like rubber. Her limbs inflated, and the air began to brighten and blur around her, shifting in and out of a myriad of dimensions. Overtones whistled through her ears, and piercing shards of multi-frequency sound filled her head as it expanded into emptiness. A deep, deafening rumble filled everything. Myriads upon myriads of thoughts streamed gossamer-like through the canvas of her mind, flinging themselves over her like leaves blown aloft in a storm, like dust clouds in a twisting hurricane. Sucked of all air, thin and arid, she gasped into this vast, whirling maelstrom. Beyond, she could sense something even more tumultuous, a booming, ominous resonance of total and utter silence. A silence that intimidated everything in a never-ending well of nothingness. A silence like thunder. She knew that silence. She had always known it. "Oh, beloved mother, what is happening to us? Please help us!" The wild cries tore at her womb, begging her to come forth and give way to the wildness within her, and surrender to the instinctual, primal impulse to attend to her children, no matter what the cost. There was nothing to hold on to, nothing to cling to. She released a blood-curdling shriek. Her cry mingled with the clamour of her lost and agonized children, and the intensity of sound ripped through the gaping emptiness that separated them. Paralyzed, she watched as a deep, fiery blaze filled her womb. Gasping, she fell to her knees, clutching her belly. Already, unbeknown to her, her light was beginning to leave the kingdom-queendom, instinctively gravitating towards her womb like a spiraling trickle of water descending down into a drain. Her eyes rolled upwards into her head. Taking an almighty inhale, she sank down into her sacrum, silently relinquishing all control. She could not bear this sorrowful torture a moment longer. With everything inside of her she surrendered. Light, longing, tenderness, mercy, and protective feelings filled her, obliterating all else. Love filled her with a burning, inconsolable urge that simply had to be obeyed. With no thought whatsoever, the Queen of Heaven sounded into her womb, and with an unwavering sovereignty, she cried out, "I am coming. Please hold on. I am coming. I will not abandon you. Not now. Not ever." Rotating rings of light etched out a gateway within her womb, a grand geometry that grew in magnetic power as every second passed. She squinted to fathom the configuration before her, accessing all known geometries she'd created in the past. Deafened by the silence it evoked, marveled by its majestic proportion, she realized its genesis was something unknown to her, and yet strangely familiar. She felt drawn into the center of this grand portal, mesmerized, fascinated, and pulled. The cries of her children intensified as the doorway became manifest. Pushing against the edges of heaven, she imploded in on herself and dove through the new dimensional geometry she had just created, determined to reach the souls of her children. She knew she had to go where no other divine soul had ever been, into the inky dark of nothingness. Like a silent comet, she blazed a trail, pressing, pushing, unfurling in colossal undulating waves, boring apart the rippling tides of the unmanifest. All that remained were dissolving tendrils, where her light had once been. And then, harrowing silence. She fell. Round and round and round she spun, her body contorted and rotated, cycling faster and faster, caught in a washing machine on infinite spin. Bits of her body melted off, crumbling and unraveling in her wild and tumultuous orbit. Spheres of diminishing light, oceans of movement and spirals of sound echoed as she fell. She descended through screeching wormholes of tumultuous passage, creating pathways and spirals of sound. And then the pressure hammered against her, pressing down her soul, squeezing every particle and atom from her being. All light around her faded, and the darkness got heavier and heavier as she was catapulted headlong into the next sphere, where the sound increased and magnified, and the pressure, oh, the pressure, my light, my soul is diminishing. She managed to look out of the spin for a moment. The piece of the stars beckoned. She reached out, yet her arm rapidly withered off, blown into stardust, effortlessly swept away by the massive waves of dark matter careering around her. She soared into yet another sphere, even denser than the last. She felt as if she was becoming strained, squeezed into a mould that was horrifyingly too small for her. Every morsel, every drop of her light was compressing in on itself. Gravity was boring into her existence, transforming her divinity. Her eyelids, or whatever was left of them, closed. She rolled back into the abyss. She dreamt she was in a black hole, dense and drawing her down, down, down. Her only consciousness became infinite time enfolded in on itself, washing everything clean, so clean it no longer existed. So clean, she no longer existed. There was no sound, no form, no light, no body. Gone. 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 Everything gone. And yet, within the heavy dark, a minuscule iota of light still burned. Yes, a seed of light flickered, faintly glowing amongst the parched aridity. She could not remember this light, however, because the part of her that could remember was already gone. Then, from the nothingness, she emerged with a sickening thud. She fumbled in the dark. "Where am I?" she screamed, and faded.